The alien hell. The sky above her was a sickly green, filled with the smog of a dying world. For as long as she could remember, the planet had been under siege, but now it had fallen completely into chaos. Nara, an alien warrior of the Talarian people, stood alone in the middle of a hellish landscape. The once vibrant forests and cities were now reduced to rubble, scorched by endless fires and ruthless invaders. She had lost everything. Her home, her people gone in a heartbeat. Her body was battered, bruised, and covered in the dirt of 1,000 battles, yet she still stood tall, refusing to break. But the worst had yet to come. Nara was captured in the dead of night, dragged into a place she had only heard of in nightmares. The alien Slaughterhouse. A place where the invaders brought their prisoners for sport and death. A place designed to break even the strongest. The sounds of screaming echoed in the distance, a constant reminder that she wasn't alone. Other prisoners were held here, victims of the alien overlords who took everything from them. But Nara had no intention of becoming one of them. She wasn't going to wait to die in a cage. The slaughterhouse was built deep inside a ravine, surrounded by jagged rocks and thick walls that blocked any hope of escape. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of blood and decay. It clung to her skin, stinging her eyes. The sky, blocked by the unnatural walls, was nothing more than a dim light that barely reached her cell. She could barely see beyond the bars that separated her from the rest of the prisoners, but she could hear them, agonized, broken. There was no hope here, no salvation. Just the constant hum of the machines that powered the slaughterhouse. Nara knew this place well. She had heard the stories, seen the broken bodies of those who tried to escape. They all failed. And now she was one of them. A number, a prisoner who would be forgotten in the annals of history. But Nara was different. She couldn't afford to be weak, to give in. Not now, not when the fate of her people still rested on the choices she made. She paced the small cell, her hands gripping the bars, her mind racing. There had to be a way out. She wasn't going to let them win. She had fought for her people's freedom her entire life, and she wouldn't die in this hellhole without trying to save them. But how? Every escape attempt she knew of ended in death. Her only hope was something she hadn't tried yet. The humans. Nara had heard stories about them, strange, unpredictable, and yet powerful in ways no one truly understood. She'd seen one before, a human soldier, fighting against overwhelming odds. If anyone could help her, it was them. But the chance of a human finding their way to the slaughterhouse was slim, even by her standards. The place was hidden well, guarded by the fiercest alien warriors. Yet, she couldn't let that stop her. Desperation made her bold. As she sat on the cold floor of her cell, her thoughts turned to the human soldier she had glimpsed once in the distance. He was different, not like the others, strong, unyielding, and for a brief moment, she had caught his eyes a fleeting connection, a spark of something more than just survival. Maybe, just maybe, he could hear her cry for help. Maybe he could hear her desperate plea to escape. She closed her eyes, imagining the moment when they would meet. He would be her salvation. The thought brought a small flicker of hope to her chest. She wasn't ready to die. Not yet. Not without giving everything she had to survive. She would fight, and she would win, even if it meant making impossible choices. But first, she needed to find a way to reach him. Her cell door creaked, breaking her thoughts. A guard was approaching. His footsteps were slow, deliberate. He didn't care about her. To him, she was just another prisoner, another life to be snuffed out when the time came. She gritted her teeth and stood tall. She wouldn't show fear. Not in front of him. Not in front of anyone. As the door opened, Nara felt a surge of anger. It wasn't the guard she had hoped for, not the one who would come to free her. It was just another of the alien soldiers, a faceless enemy who had come to remind her that there was no escape. He sneered at her, his alien eyes cold and unfeeling. "You'll die here," he said, his voice a harsh growl. Just like the rest of them, Nara didn't flinch. She stared at him, defiance in her eyes. "No," she said softly, her voice low but filled with conviction. "Not like the rest of them." With that, the door slammed shut and the guard left, leaving her alone again in the darkness of her prison. But Nara wasn't broken. Not yet. She was determined to survive, and she would do whatever it took to escape this alien hell. The battle was far from over, and as long as she drew breath, she would fight for her freedom. Her plea for help was out there. She just had to wait for the right moment, the right chance to reach out, and when it came, she wouldn't be alone anymore. The human soldier, the wind howled outside, a chilling reminder that the world beyond the slaughterhouse was still there. But for Nara, it might as well have been a distant dream. The walls around her were cold, unforgiving, and unyielding, trapping her in a prison she could not escape. But in the back of her mind, a spark of hope burned, faint but alive. A human, she remembered, a soldier was out there, somewhere in the vast unknown. And he was her only chance. The human had come into her thoughts again and again during the long, lonely hours she spent pacing her cell. She had seen him from a distance once, a warrior among the invaders, not like the others, different in ways she couldn't explain. He had been fierce, determined, and yet there was something else, something that made her believe he wasn't just another killer. She had sensed it the moment their eyes met across the battlefield, but that was months ago. Would he still remember her? Would he even be able to find her in the heart of this deadly prison? Deep down, she knew the answer. She had to believe that he could hear her call. She had to believe that hope wasn't as far away as it seemed. Meanwhile, on a distant part of the planet, an entirely different battle was unfolding. Captain Jace Connors of the Terran Army, a soldier hardened by years of warfare, stood over a map of the slaughterhouse's layout. His mission was clear: rescue a prisoner, an alien woman trapped by the ruthless invaders. The orders had come directly from the high command, and they left no room for failure. But the more Jace studied the map, the more uncertain he became. The slaughterhouse was one of the most fortified places on the planet, a death trap for anyone who dared enter. Still, Jace had faced worse. He was no stranger to impossible odds. He had fought in countless battles, but this was different. This wasn't just about survival, it was about doing the right thing. The moment the distress signal had reached his ship, he knew he had to answer it. A life was in danger. He would save her, no matter the cost. He leaned closer to the map, tracing a route with his finger. The alien stronghold was heavily guarded, and the prisoner's location was unknown. It could take days to break in, and the alien creatures that patrolled the area were not something to be taken lightly. Yet, Jace couldn't shake the feeling that this mission was more than just another assignment. This alien woman, Nara, had been calling out for help, and now, he was her only hope. But even Jace, the most battle-hardened soldier, felt a twinge of doubt. What if it was a trap? What if they were just bait to lure him in, to kill him like the others who had dared to challenge the invaders? Still, he pushed the thought aside. Doubt would get him killed. Determination would keep him alive. As the transport ship touched down on the edge of the slaughterhouse's perimeter, Jace geared up, making sure his weapons were locked and loaded. The harsh winds of the planet slammed against the ship's hull. But he didn't flinch. He was used to the storm, to the chaos, to the violence. None of it mattered. What mattered now was the woman who needed him, and he wasn't going to let her down. The door to the ship hissed open, and the cold wind rushed in, stinging his face. Jace stepped out, his boots crunching on the rocky ground. The dark, looming walls of the slaughterhouse towered over him, and in that moment, he realized just how much danger he was in. There would be no turning back. He moved forward with purpose, his every step calculated, his eyes scanning for any sign of the enemy. The silence around him was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of machinery deep inside the slaughterhouse. It felt like walking into the jaws of a predator, but Chase didn't hesitate. He knew the stakes. He knew what he had to do. As he entered the narrow corridor leading deeper into the heart of the slaughterhouse, the air grew thick, heavy with the smell of blood and death. The walls seemed to close in on him, but he refused to show any sign of fear. He had made it this far. There was no turning back now. With each step his mind raced. Was Nara still alive? Had the invaders already destroyed her? His thoughts kept returning to her, her desperate plea echoing in his mind. Don't leave me in this alien hell. Her words were a fire burning inside him, urging him forward. Finally, Jace reached the inner chambers of the slaughterhouse. The guards were stationed around the perimeter, their alien forms nearly invisible in the shadows. Jace moved quickly. Silently, blending into the darkness, he had to be fast. If they spotted him, there would be no chance of survival. He crouched down behind a pile of alien machinery, waiting for the right moment to strike. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught his eye. A guard, just one, moving in his direction. Without thinking, Jace leaped into action, his weapon raised. The guard never saw him coming. In one swift motion, Jace incapacitated the alien, dragging it into the shadows before it could raise an alarm. His pulse quickened. He was so close. Nara was somewhere just beyond this room, and he could feel it. She was waiting for him, hoping that he would keep his promise. He couldn't fail her. The next room was filled with strange, eerie sounds, noises of creatures, of technology far beyond anything Jace had seen. But nothing would stop him now. He pressed on, determined to find her, determined to fulfill the plea she had sent across the stars. And then, at the far end of the room, he saw her, a silhouette against the dim light. She was standing tall, despite the chains that bound her, her eyes focused on him. A flicker of recognition passed between them. "Nara," he whispered. Stepping forward, she looked at him, her expression filled with something he couldn't quite place. Desperation? Hope? "Don't leave me in this alien hell," she pleaded softly. Jace's heart clenched. He had made it. They had made it. And together, they would escape. The fight for survival. Nara's body trembled with exhaustion, but her spirit refused to break. The alien hell that surrounded her had tried to crush her every will to survive. But as the human soldier's footsteps neared, a surge of hope coursed through her veins. She had no idea how much longer she could last, but she knew she couldn't die in this place. Not without a fight. Not without trying. The walls of the slaughterhouse were designed to torment. They were not simply holding cells. They were prisons of the mind, crafted to wear down any prisoner who was unfortunate enough to enter. The air was thick with a constant hum of alien machinery, creating a sense of urgency that never faded. The distant sounds of monstrous creatures patrolling the hallways echoed around her, their growls and snarls reminding her that she wasn't alone in this hell. She wasn't the only one struggling to survive. Her cell, a small suffocating space made of cold steel bars, was her prison, but it was also her only refuge for now. Her wrists were still bruised from the shackles, her body covered in cuts and burns from previous encounters with the invaders. Yet her resolve remained strong. The time for waiting was over. The human soldier was out there. She could feel it in her bones. He was coming for her. But the slaughterhouse was a deadly maze. Every corridor, every corner was a potential death trap. The alien beasts that patrolled the facility weren't the only threat. The very environment itself was designed to break the will of the prisoners. Dangerous traps lay hidden in the walls, floor, and ceiling, tendrils of steel that would pierce through flesh in an instant, causing death without warning. Escape was impossible without intelligence, quick reflexes, and most importantly, trust. Nara knew she couldn't escape alone. But there was a growing sense of someone who could help her. The human soldier, Jace, she had seen his fire, his strength, and though he was a stranger, he was the only one who could understand the urgency in her eyes. He had the potential to get her out of here. As if on cue, she heard it footsteps, faint but growing louder. A shadow shifted. Against the dim walls, her heart skipped a beat. It was him. Her breath caught in her throat. But something didn't feel right. Her survival instincts kicked in. There was danger lurking in the shadows. They were being watched. Without thinking, Nara darted to the far corner of her cell, pressing her back against the cold, metal wall. She tried to steady her breathing, but it was hard to calm her racing heart. Was it just Jace, or were the invaders close behind? She couldn't risk being caught. Not now, not when the chance for freedom was within reach. A soft metallic click echoed in the stillness of the hallway. An alarm triggered. The guards, alerted by the breach in their security, began their patrol, their presence spreading throughout the facility. There was no turning back now. The slaughterhouse had begun to stir. Suddenly, Jace's voice broke through the tension, low and filled with urgency. "Nara," he whispered, his voice carrying through the cell bars. She could hear the determination in his tone. She wasn't alone anymore. His presence was a lifeline, but it also meant they were both in greater danger. The human had made it this far, but he was unaware of just how deep the trap went. "Stay quiet," Nara whispered back, her voice barely audible. "They'll hear us." She could sense the shift in the air. The tension had thickened. Every instinct screamed for them to act fast, but she knew they couldn't afford to rush. Their enemies were everywhere, and one wrong move would lead to their death. Her mind raced. She needed to warn him. The next few moments would decide everything. She leaned toward the bars of her cell, her voice firm, despite the fear that gnawed at her. "You have to get me out of here. But we need to be careful. This place is worse than you can imagine." Jace nodded from the shadows, his silhouette just visible against the dim light. "We'll make it out, I promise. Just hold on." A little longer. But Nara knew that hope alone wouldn't be enough. The slaughterhouse had no mercy. It only knew how to break the strong, and she was no exception. The alien monsters, the traps, the ever-present hum of the machines, it all threatened to overwhelm her. But the sight of Jace, standing there against the odds, gave her the strength she needed. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a symbol of something greater, something she hadn't dared to hope for in this HELHOLE. As the guards neared, Nara made her decision. The moment was now. "Get ready," she said, her voice shaking with adrenaline. "We move fast. If we don't, we die here." She knew it would be a fight won. She wasn't sure she would survive. But the thought of dying alone in the dark was worse than anything this alien hell could throw at her. And as the shadows closed in, Nara and Jace made their move, taking the first step toward their uncertain future, side by side. The first bond, the silence between Nara and Jace was deafening. It wasn't the kind of silence that brought peace. It was the kind that carried weight, a tension so thick it nearly choked them both. They had just narrowly escaped the first wave of patrols, but their journey through the slaughterhouse had only just begun. Every step they took brought them closer to the unknown, to danger, and yet, it also brought them closer to something else, a partnership, something neither of them had expected. They moved cautiously through the labyrinth of corridors, their eyes scanning every shadow, every flicker of movement. The walls seemed to close in on them, and the atmosphere was stifling. The air was damp with the smell of decay, and the low hum of the slaughterhouse's machinery sent shivers down Nara's spine. The place was alive with danger, each hallway like a new trial, each turn a possible death trap. But with Jace by her side, she felt a surge of courage she hadn't known she had. She wasn't alone anymore. Jace led the way, his every movement deliberate, his eyes sharp as he watched for any sign of the enemy. Nara walked close behind him, her hand resting lightly on the hilt of her weapon, ready to defend them both if the need arose. They hadn't spoken much since their first meeting, but the air between them was thick with unspoken understanding. They didn't need words right now, they needed action. And they both knew that as they passed through yet another narrow, dimly lit corridor. Nara couldn't help but steal a glance at Jace. He was different from the soldier she had fought against. There was something in his eyes, something more than the determination to survive. She had seen it before, in her people. It was the will to fight for something greater than just survival. It was a spark of hope in a place that tried to snuff it out. She couldn't help but wonder why he was risking his life for her. She had never met a human like him. He wasn't here for power or glory or anything she could understand. He was here to help her. And that realization hit her harder than any physical blow she had endured in this place. There was kindness in him, and that kindness made him dangerous in a way. He didn't fear what was coming, but he should. "Why are you doing this?" Nara asked, her voice barely a whisper, but the question had been burning in her for hours. Jace didn't look back at her immediately. He kept walking, his eyes scanning the hallway in front of him. "You're not the first person I've had to save," he said, his voice low but steady. "But you're the first one I felt I might actually be able to help." Nara raised an eyebrow. "You think you can help me?" Jace paused for a moment, and for the first time, he turned to meet her gaze. His expression was hard, but his eyes were softer than she expected. "I didn't think I could at first, but now I'm sure. We get out of here, together." The certainty in his voice struck her in a way she couldn't explain. It wasn't just the words. It was the belief behind them. It was the feeling that, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she wasn't just fighting for her life, she was fighting with someone. Fighting for someone, she nodded, though she didn't speak. She wasn't used to this partnership, trust, humanity. But she was beginning to understand. The Slaughterhouse had tried to break her, to strip away everything that made her who she was. But Jace was something else. He wasn't here to take, he was here to give. And she could feel that, deep in her bones. The moment didn't last long, though. The quiet was shattered by a loud screeching sound, the unmistakable sound of metal scraping against metal. A door ahead of them clanged open, and they froze, instantly alert. A flash of movement, a silhouette darted across the far end of the corridor. "Stay close," Jace whispered, his voice a sharp command. Nara was already in motion, stepping closer to him, her hand moving instinctively toward her weapon. They pressed themselves against the wall, waiting for the threat to reveal itself. The shadows stretched long as the sounds of footsteps echoed through the corridor. Nara's pulse quickened. She could feel her heart hammering in her chest, but it wasn't fear that surged through her veins, it was adrenaline. A fierce primal desire to survive. Through the darkness, they saw the first of the creatures, a hulking, alien beast with red eyes that gleamed with hunger. It was scanning the hallway, its senses trained to find any signs of life. It didn't see them yet, but it was only a matter of time, on my count, Jace said, his voice low and steady. "We move." Nara nodded, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was it. There was no turning back now. She would fight alongside Jace, and they would make it out of this hell together. She had never been more sure of anything in her life. 1-2 now. In a flash they both moved. Jace darted forward with a speed that left Nara in awe. He was quick and precise, his movements like a well-oiled machine. Nara followed closely behind, her own weapon drawn, ready for whatever came next. The beast turned just as Jace reached it, but it was too late. Jace struck first, his weapon slicing through the alien's thick hide with ease. Nara joined in, moving fluidly alongside him, her strikes precise and deadly. The creature barely had time to react before it collapsed to the ground, lifeless. For a moment, everything was still. Nara stood over the fallen beast, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She couldn't believe it. They had done it. Together. Jace turned to her, his face hard, but a smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "That's how we do it," he said, his voice filled with quiet pride. And in that moment, something shifted inside Nara. She wasn't just a prisoner anymore. She wasn't just a survivor. She was part of something bigger. With Jace by her side, there was no limit to what they could do. They had made their first true bond. And now they were unstoppable. The escape plan, the air in the slaughterhouse felt thicker now, as if it was pressing down on them from all sides. Nara could almost taste the desperation in the stale air. The walls, once silent and unmoving, now seemed to pulse with a life of their own, as if the very structure of the prison was alive, watching them. And it was watching, waiting for them to fail. But failure was not an option. Jace's steady presence behind her kept her grounded. His movements were purposeful, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. But she knew him now, knew that beneath his hardened exterior, there was something more, a fire that could not be quenched, a will to fight that mirrored her own. She had seen it in his eyes, in the way he handled his weapon with such precision, the way he spoke of escaping this hellhole. Not just for her, but for both of them. Nara's mind raced as they moved deeper into the slaughterhouse's labyrinthine corridors. There had to be a way out. She had spent too many years fighting for survival, for her people, to simply give up now. But the walls around them, the closed doors, the alien creatures that lurked in every shadow, everything was designed to keep them in, to break their spirit before they even had a chance to fight back. "Jace," she whispered, her voice low, her eyes darting to the closed doors that lined the hallway. "We need a plan. We can't just keep running." Jace's expression tightened, and for a moment he didn't answer. His hand rested on the hilt of his weapon, his mind clearly working, calculating their next move. The silence stretched between them, but Nara didn't mind. She could feel it too, the weight of the moment. This was no longer just about escaping the slaughterhouse. This was about something bigger. This was about winning. About proving that humanity could survive, even here, in the heart of alien terror. Finally Jace spoke, his voice steady but filled with an urgency that Nara had learned to respect. "We're not just running, Nara. We're making our stand. This place... It has an access point, a control room. I've been tracking the power lines. If we can get to it, we can shut down the facility's systems, shut off their traps, their alarms, everything. But we need to move fast. Once we make it to the control room, we have one shot." Nara's eyes narrowed as she processed the plan. "And what about the creatures?" Jace grinned, a sharp, determined smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We take them out, one at a time." It was a dangerous plan, Nara knew that. They had no guarantee they would make it to the control room. No guarantee that the slaughterhouse's systems would be as vulnerable as Jace thought. But it was their only option. Without it, they were dead. "How far?" she asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it. "Not far," Jace replied, pointing toward the far end of the hall. "But it's heavily guarded. We'll have to clear the way." Nara's stomach twisted. The thought of facing the alien beasts again, of fighting for her life, made her body tense, but it also filled her with purpose. She had fought worse odds before, and she wasn't about to stop now. Not when freedom was within reach. "We do it your way," she said, her voice firm. They moved quickly, their footsteps silent on the cold metal floor. Jace led his movements. Precise, methodical. Nara followed closely, her senses on high alert. The slaughterhouse was a living thing, an entity that could sense their every move, track their every step. And Nara could feel it. She could feel the eyes of the alien beasts, watching them, waiting for them to slip up. At the end of the corridor, they stopped. A large door loomed before them, its surface scratched and battered from previous attempts to break through. It was locked, but Nara could see the faint outline of a control panel next to it, just out of sight. Jace was already there, kneeling by the panel, his fingers moving quickly as he worked. Come on, Jace muttered, his voice barely audible. His brow furrowed in concentration, the tension in his posture giving away just how much was riding on this moment. Nara stood guard, her weapon raised, her ears straining to catch any sound that might betray their location. Her mind raced with possibilities, every escape route, every weapon at her disposal. She wasn't going to let this slip away. Not now, not after everything they had been through. The door clicked open. Go, Jace said, his voice sharp. Nara didn't need another word. She moved forward, slipping through the narrow opening and into the next chamber. Jace followed close behind, and together, they crept into the heart of the Slaughterhouse's control center. It was a large room, filled with alien technology, monitors displaying cryptic symbols, and machinery that hummed with a life of its own. But in the center of it all, there was a large terminal, its surface illuminated by a faint green glow. Jace approached it, his fingers flying over the controls. Almost there, he muttered. Suddenly, the walls around them shuddered, and Nara heard the unmistakable growl of an alien beast coming from the hallway. Their time was running out. Jace, hurry! She shouted, her voice filled with urgency. Jace worked faster, his hands a blur as he typed commands into the terminal. We've got this, he said through gritted teeth, but Nara could see the sweat beading on his forehead. The beast's growls grew louder. The doors to the control rooms slammed shut behind them. They were trapped. Betrayal and sacrifice, the sharp clanging of metal against metal, reverberated through the air as Nara and Jace stood in the dimly lit control room. The alien systems hummed ominously around them, their presence heavy and all-encompassing. The countdown to shutdown was nearly complete. One more command, and the Slaughterhouse's defenses would be offline, allowing them to escape. But as Jace's fingers hovered over the final key, a sinking feeling hit Nara like a tidal wave. Something wasn't right. She could feel the tension in the air, as if the walls themselves were closing in on them. A strange noise echoed in the hallway outside, a low, guttural sound that made her stomach twist with dread. Jace, we're not alone, Nara whispered, her voice taut with fear. Jace froze, his hand hovering over the keyboard, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the surroundings. The silence that followed felt suffocating, oppressive. Keep going, Nara urged, trying to push down the sense of impending doom creeping into her chest. We need this now. But Jace hesitated. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. The weight of the moment was too heavy to ignore. He'd never questioned his decisions in battle before, but the thought of what lay beyond the door made him second-guess himself now. Suddenly, the door to the control room burst open with a violent crash, and Nara's heart dropped to her stomach. Standing in the doorway was an alien officer, its massive frame towering over them, its glowing eyes filled with malice. Behind it, a squad of soldiers armed with devastating weapons advanced toward them. Nara's pulse raced. There was no time left. Jace, we can't fight them all, Nara said urgently, grabbing his arm. Shut it down now. Jace looked torn, his eyes flickering between the terminal and the advancing enemy. The temptation to fight was there, to take down these monsters who had captured so many lives, but the risk was too high. If they stayed and fought, they would never make it out alive. But just as he was about to push the final command, the alien officer spoke, its voice like the grinding of rocks. You think you can escape? It snarled. You're too late. Nara's eyes darted to the terminal, and in a split second, she realized what was happening. The officer wasn't just standing there, it was waiting. The shutdown sequence was a trap. It had been designed to fail, to lure them into a false sense of victory. The very system they thought they were deactivating was now being used to trap them inside. Without thinking, Nara shoved Jace aside, her mind racing. She sprinted toward the control panel, her heart hammering as her instinct screamed that they were being led into a deadly snare. She slammed her palm against the terminal, trying to override the shutdown process manually. But it was too late. The terminal flickered, and the lights in the room flickered with it. Everything went dark for a moment, leaving them in a suffocating blackness. Then the alarm blared. "No!" Jace shouted, his voice breaking the silence. "The doors, Nara, the doors are locked." The alien officer's laughter filled the air, cold and mocking. "Did you really think this was going to be easy? You are nothing but pawns in this game." Nara's blood ran cold. She realized with sudden clarity that the alien overlords knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't a fight for freedom. It was a test. They were playing with her, with both of them, to see how far they could push before they broke. Jace spun around to face her, his face hard with determination. "We're not done yet, Nara. We can still make it." Nara shook her head. "No. It's too late. They've won." Jace grabbed her arm, pulling her close. His eyes were filled with the kind of resolve she had seen in soldiers about to face certain death. "I'm not leaving you behind," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We get out of here together. We don't give up." But Nara could see the truth in his eyes. He knew what had to be done, just as she did. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her, the terrible realization settling in her bones. To escape this nightmare, one of them would have to make the ultimate sacrifice. The thought made her stomach churn. As the alien officer barked orders at its soldiers to prepare for capture, Nara turned to Jace. She knew what she had to do. It was the only way. "You have to go," she whispered, her voice filled with pain. "There's no time." "What are you talking about?" Jace asked, his grip tightening on her arm. "You're the one they're after, Jace," she said, her voice breaking. "You're the one who can escape. I can't go with you. I'm not strong enough, but you are. You're the one who has a chance to make it out alive. You need to go, now." Jace's face twisted in confusion and anger. "Nara, no, we're not doing this. We're in this together. I'm not leaving you here." But Nara wasn't listening. Her mind was already made up. There was no other choice. She couldn't let Jace die in this hellhole because of her. She wasn't going to be the reason he lost his life, just like all the others who had fallen before her. As the alien soldiers closed in, Nara pushed Jace toward the exit. "Go now," she cried, her voice firm, desperate. "It's the only way." Jace hesitated, looking back at her one last time, but it was too late. The alien officer lunged forward, and in that split second, Nara made the hardest decision of her life. She turned toward the soldiers, raising her weapon, her heart breaking as she faced the truth. She was going to hold them off for him. For Jace, so he could survive. The last thing she heard before everything went black was Jace's voice, screaming her name. And then the door slammed shut. The final stand. The air was thick with tension as Nara stood alone in the center of the control room, the faint glow of the terminal casting eerie shadows across the walls. The alarms continued to blare, their shrill cries filling the space like a warning, a reminder that escape was no longer an option. But Nara wasn't thinking about escape anymore. She was thinking about survival, about fighting until the very end. Her heart still echoed with the sound of Jace's name, his voice screaming her name just before the doors closed. She hadn't wanted to leave him behind, but the alien forces had cornered them both, and there was no way out. He was gone, she was certain of it. The thought twisted her stomach, but there was no time for grief. Not now. The invaders would not stop until they had eradicated everything that stood in their way. She couldn't let that happen. Not to him, not to anyone else who still had a chance. Nara's hand clenched around the hilt of her weapon, the weight of it familiar, like an old friend she had leaned on in the darkest of times. The alien soldiers were closing in on her, their footsteps echoing down the hallway outside. They were coming for her, expecting her to break, to surrender, but she wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. She would fight to the last breath if she had to. Her mind raced with plans, but each one fell apart the moment she considered it. She was outnumbered, outgunned, and alone. There was no escape route now. The control room's doors were locked tight, and the walls seemed to close in around her with every passing second. Still, she refused to let fear overtake her. She had survived far worse than this. A cold laugh echoed through the speakers, the alien officer's voice dripping with malice. "You've done well to get this far, little warrior. But your fight ends here." Nara clenched her jaw, her eyes narrowing. She wasn't done. Not yet. She had one last card to play. The terminal. The very system that had betrayed them was now her only chance. If she could access the hidden controls one more time, she might be able to destroy the slaughterhouse from within. It wasn't much, but it was the only chance she had left. With a determined step, Nara approached the terminal, her fingers shaking as she pressed the activation keys. The screen flickered, a cascade of alien symbols flashing across the surface. She could hear the soldiers outside, their heavy boots stomping on the metal floor, drawing nearer. They were almost there. But Nara didn't stop. She couldn't stop. The system was still vulnerable, and she had to exploit that weakness before it was too late. A sharp buzz echoed as the system rejected her attempts to access the core controls. She gritted her teeth, frustration clawing at her, but she refused to be deterred. There had to be a way in. She had seen the controls before, during her brief time in the slaughterhouse, and there was one function, one fail-safe she hadn't tried. Nara's mind flashed to Jace, his face, his promise to get her out. She could almost hear his words in her ears. "Together, we can make it out. We can survive this." She wouldn't let his sacrifice be in vain. She couldn't. With a sudden determined movement, she punched in a new command, a series of complex codes she had memorized in the days before everything went wrong. Her breath came in shallow gasps as the system flickered again, the lights overhead dimming slightly. Then, the screen went black. For a moment, everything went silent. No alarms, no sounds of the alien soldiers. Just the thudding of her heart. In her ears, and then the entire facility shook, the walls groaning as if in pain. Nara's eyes widened in realization. She had done it. She had triggered the self-destruct sequence that the countdown started 1 minute. That was all the time she had left. She didn't know if Jace was still alive, if he had made it out of the slaughterhouse. But she knew one thing for sure. She was going to make sure this place never hurt anyone again. She moved quickly, pulling the hood of her tattered cloak over her head and grabbing her weapon. The soldiers outside had heard the system's failure, and their footsteps were growing louder, faster. She could hear their voices, shouting commands, racing toward the control room, but Nara was already moving. She didn't have the luxury of time. She knew this place better than anyone, and she used that knowledge to her advantage. She darted through the corridors, her eyes scanning the shadows for any signs of movement. The countdown was ticking, the final moments of the slaughterhouse's existence slipping away. Just as the first soldier turned the corner, she raised her weapon, firing in one smooth motion. The shot rang out, hitting its mark, and the soldier collapsed without a sound. Nara didn't stop. She moved swiftly, dodging the remaining patrols as she made her way to the escape pod bay. She could feel the ground trembling beneath her feet, the slaughterhouse reacting to its impending destruction. Every second was precious now. As Nara approached the final door, she saw the escape pods waiting, their sleek designs a stark contrast to the chaos around her. They were her only way out. But she had one last thing to do. She turned back toward the corridor, the sound of alien voices growing closer. She could hear the footsteps of the remaining soldiers behind her. They were too close. In a split-second decision, Nara hit the emergency lock on the pod bay, sealing it behind her. The alien soldiers wouldn't get through in time. She climbed into the escape pod, her hands trembling as she activated the launch sequence. The countdown flashed before her eyes. She glanced back at the slaughterhouse one last time, the place that had tried to break her, to make her its prisoner. And then, with a final breath, she launched herself into the unknown, the pod rocketing through the atmosphere, leaving the ruins of the slaughterhouse and the past behind. The countdown reached 0. And the slaughterhouse exploded in a brilliant flash of light.